Alright guys, so one thing I wanted to show you real quick is how to deal with a dent or a sagged out part. Like I said earlier, sometimes when you're putting resin on, it absorbs into the card and kind of sags a bit. So easiest way to fix that is just by applying heat and bending it out. Now, this is... Oh, you can see that this part here is flattened when it's supposed to be more rounded, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my heat gun, just put it on the low setting, give it a few seconds back and forth, and then pop this bend out. So it's nothing crazy, it's just a little bit of heat, and then stick your hand in there and hold it till it cools. You don't want to go too hot because this is plastic after all and it doesn't melt. So you make it too hot, you can burn yourself quite easily. But yeah, essentially you just want to kind of bend it back into the shape you wanted and just wait for it to cool. Alright guys, so we're going to start fiberglassing this section here now. The camera did die and the battery needed to be charged, so I went ahead and I fiberglassed this one already. That was just the first coat of fiberglass. Some of the finer points inside need still to be covered, but generally this one is done. I've done a bunch of the cutting and cleaning up on it, so there's not a whole lot left to do here, but I still have more fiberglass to add, so I'll start with that. Finish this one off, and then we'll move over to this one. So, fiberglass, you can buy it in like matte, which is just strings of fiberglass, or you can buy it in cloth, which I like. This stuff. Both have their merit. I mean, matte gets into crevices and shit a lot easier, but I find this stuff is a lot easier and faster to work with, and a little less messy. So, what I do is I just cut it into strips, like these, and then I apply a little bit of resin inside, put my strip down, and then use my brush covered in resin to tap it into place. You want to make sure you overlap. You don't want them being side by side. You always want one just a little bit over the other. Kind of like a brick pattern, in a sense. Like if you remember playing with Lego when you were a kid, try and mimic that with this. Another thing that I do is, if I do my first coat like this, then my second coat would be like this. Alright, so that's going to give me as much coverage and much strength as I can with the minimal amount of fiberglass. This stuff is sort of expensive. This batch here, which would probably be enough for this leg, is like 13 bucks. It's not crazy expensive, but when you're doing a big project, you're going to buy a lot of it. It doesn't really work out to buy the bigger $36 package. It's not any cheaper or any better. So anyways, I'm going to go ahead and cut a bunch of this up, start gluing, or start fiberglassing this in, and yeah. There's something to notice. It's a little bit of a warp along this line. I'm not exactly happy with that shape there. So I'm going to take a bit of heat to it and just try and bend it out a little bit. See if I can straighten this up. Make it fit a little bit better here. That's probably more along the lines of what I want, and it's kind of default shape. Alright, so not putting any stress on it. Now there's how I want it to sit. So this is going to take a little bit of bending and a little bit of heat, but should be easy enough to fix. So just like the lower leg, heat it up for a few seconds, it gets real soft and squishy, and then just kind of hold it in the shape I want until it cools. So yeah, that's pretty much reshaping resined parts. Now you have to do it while it's still resin, because if you were to do this after you fiberglassed it, there's a really good chance it's not going to come back or stay where you wanted it to be. It'll actually go back to the original defect. So by doing this now, I should be able to avoid having to try and do this again later. It's not impossible to do it once fiberglass, it's just a lot harder. And if you're doing the rondo approach, you can do it that way as well and heat up rondo a little bit, because rondo is going to be mostly plastic, mostly resin. So if you heat up rondo, you can warp it a little bit, but again, it's one of those things that it's best to do it in this state before getting into anything with more material, because at this point it's still real easy to work with. Alright, so better idea of how the fiberglass works. You want to mix up your resin down here, about 10 drops of hardener to an ounce of resin. Adding more isn't going to make it harden any harder, it's just going to make it harden faster. Adding less means it won't harden at all. So, anyways, get a bunch on the brush, smear that around inside, and because we did an excessive 3 coats on the outside of this thing, we don't have to be light and gentle about the inside. We've done 1 coat already in the inside as well, but this is one of those things where having lots of resin is actually a good thing. You don't want to go light here. All right, fiberglass mat, pre-cut into little strips. You can do triangles if you want. I just do rectangles because it's fast and easy. And put it in there. And just kind of tack it in with your fingers. If you now once it's tacked in there, get a little bit of resin on your brush, come in and you just dab it down. Now you want to dab this instead of brushing it on, because if you brush it, I'll show you, you'll end up moving the fiberglass. Not so much when you have 1 piece, but when you have 2 pieces and a lot of resin there, it just kind of slides around and makes a mess of things. So we bring in our second piece. Again, just going to dab it on, pushing it into the corners. So in these weird little angles like this, I want to go in and make sure it grabs that corner. And you just do that over and over again until you've covered the entire way around. Some little crevices, kind of like, well, yeah, along here. I'm not actually going to fiberglass this piece because there's really not a point to it, but I will fiberglass up the side. Again, you always want to overlap just a little bit. This is going to help you more when you do the cleanup end, where you got to make sure there's no spiky bits to dig into your skin. A lot of people who aren't careful or haven't worked with fiberglass before don't realize that if you leave spiky bits on this and it's going up against your body, because you're probably going to wear a bodysuit under this, that it will stab you, get stuck in your skin, and cause a bunch of irritation, rashes, stuff like that. It can even get itself into the bloodstream, and that's not something you want. So overlapping helps keep the spiky edges down, and so when you go to clean this up, you have to do a lot less work. Don't be afraid to have it come over the lip here a lot. A lot of people that I've seen on YouTube like to keep it real close to the edge so they're not wasting any fiberglass. You don't get proper coverage that way, and it makes it real hard to trim it down later. So I always go over. If you go over a little bit, really this is like a penny worth of fiberglass. You're not you're not saving yourself $1 million, and you're making your life a lot easier too. So that's pretty much it. I'm gonna go through and do the rest of this without the camera on, and I'll bring it back when I'm all done and show you a little bit of how I do the second layer of fiberglass. Cool.